things happen. It's my pleasure to moderate you on this specific discussion. Usually I say that for the promotion of legislative modernization and digital transformation, it cannot happen without parliamentary cooperation, both at the institutional level and collaboration at the peer level. It means institutions are meant to work together regionally, globally, divided by their geography or by their interests, or either colleagues informally sharing their expertise in times of normality and in times of crisis. For that, these networks of collaboration you represent here today are of the utmost importance. And without further ado, I'd like to invite all of you to share to these colleagues here present today, what does your organization do in the interparliamentary realm and interparliamentary diplomacy realm? So I'd like to start with you, Rodolfo. Please share a little bit on what you do at the House of Representatives, reaching out to other parliaments. Feel free to share your participation in these networks I just mentioned as well.
Okay, and may I share
yes, absolutely.
My computer screen? Okay.
Yes. You have 2 minutes, so
all right. No, it's meant to be fast. So what we do is we have been talking and working together with other parliaments for the last, I would say, 5 years, and we share the same goals. So that's the way we can keep the team or the group going on. And one of the projects that we have been working on is what we call Inter-parliamentary Open Data Cloud. And the idea is to have a single point of access for laws and bills on the internet. So it will be available for MEPs and peace advisors and citizens in general, academia, in order to foster the development of comparative analysis studies and so on. So what we do is, using the Inter-Parliamentary Union, we decided to propose a new project, which is this Open Data Cloud, and we start getting contributions from all the other parliaments, and then we became a group, and we have been working on this for the last 2 or 3 years. That's the kind of work that I have been doing, and sharing the information among parliaments is one of the best cost-effective ways to learn how to tackle with the challenge that we have been facing in the digital version of a parliament. Back to you, Luís. I'm trying to be as fast as I can.
Thank you very much, Rodolfo, for your kind opening remarks. I'd like to invite you, James, now, James Pinnell from the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, to answer the same question. What does the CPA do in this realm, and what's your role in it?
Yeah, thank you so much, Luís, and thanks on behalf of the entire CPA for the invitation to this conversation. I think it's very, very timely and very, very important, and perhaps all too rare that we're discussing technology in the legislative realm. Absolutely more than happy to give a very quick introduction to the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. We're a membership association which brings together members from across the Commonwealth, irrespective of gender, race, religion, or culture, all of whom are united by a community of interest, respect for the rule of law, the pursuit of the positive ideals of parliamentary democracy, and also good governance. We have 180 legislatures, so we're a very, very large association. The reason for that being that we have both national and subnational parliaments within our membership, and I'll discuss a little bit more about that later on in this debate. And that's right across the Commonwealth, so 9 regions, so we truly are global, and it really is a vast opportunity for parliamentarians and parliamentary staff to collaborate on issues of mutual interest and also to share good practice, both at the individual parliamentarian level, but also as part of wider institutional strengthening. I think it's pertinent to also mention the CPA has endorsed the common principles for support to parliaments. We endorsed those in 2020. I know it's the IPU that convened the body that created those. We did play a part in that, and in signing up to those, we recognise the unique character of each parliament, and especially the principle that you can't have a single model or system. When you're approaching legislative issues, you need to recognise the unique character of every parliament, and I think that's especially important in these conversations when we consider the varying levels of sophistication within the legislature. And absolutely, the CPA treats the opportunity for peer-to-peer learning as one of our key strengths. Again, I think that's why it's fantastic that we have events such as this. And much of our programmatic offering that we provide at the CPA is focused on this peer-to-peer mutual strengthening perspective. We have an academy which involves parliaments delivering lectures and video briefings on all different aspects of the legislative process, committee system, the role of the parliamentarian, many videos, great resource online. We also have our seminars, Luís, which you'll be pretty well acquainted with now. We also have a number of networks within the CPA, which also is built on this peer-to-peer learning principle. Technology and innovation is a slightly newer thematic priority for us, but it is mainstreamed into our 3-year strategic plan. So very much a commitment. And really this peer-to-peer learning is why I'm so looking forward to these discussions and also the wider program today and tomorrow. So thanks so much, Luís.
Thank you, James. Alisha, Alisha Todd from ParlAmericas. Would you like to share very briefly what does ParlAmerica do? You probably watched the first session today, which we welcome the Honorable Ernella Hain, the former president of the network of ParlAmericas. But it would be great to hear it from you and from your perspective as the general director of the organization as well.
Thank you, Luís. Again, as always, such a pleasure to be here with Bússola Tech. And I'm so glad that you had Ernella Hain on today. What a privilege to hear him speak about this theme. Look, ParlAmericas, not dissimilarly to CPA, we are the parliamentary organization to convene the national parliaments from across the Americas and the Caribbean, kind of specifically the 35 national parliaments from this hemisphere or the Western Hemisphere. Although I think currently we're doing a Bússola Tech Americas, so we'll call it this hemisphere. Everybody's in our hemisphere today, virtually. We are headquartered here in Ottawa, Canada. So not just like CPA does, we are a member organization. It's the parliaments. We're members of ParlAmericas. They help guide sort of the priorities of the organization for peer-to-peer exchange to help parliaments sort of engage with each other, learn from each other, and advance progress on priority issues. And we do have then within us the Open Parliament Network. And so this is where our work, I guess, most closely lines up with the session today. And that is that was led by, at the time, Senator Hain, to kind of create this in this hemisphere. And it's connected us with the Open Government Partnership. So I guess that's something that we do with ParlAmericas. It's about inter-parliamentary, but it's also how do we engage parliaments with multilateral spaces and how those parliaments can then engage and influence and learn from kind of the commitments being made by governments as well at a multilateral level. So we spearheaded with a number of partners, the creation of both a global network for parliaments in Open Parliament, and then we have the network here in this hemisphere. So that's my quick intro, because I think you want me to be quick.
Thank you so much, Alisha. Just an FYI, although our conference is focused on the Americas, we do have colleagues from Europe, Africa, Asia and Pacific as well. So the conference is global, although the program is focused on the Americas. I'd like to start our debate with you, Rodolfo. You just presented some things that you have been doing with the IPU Open Data Hub. So in addition to your role as the transparency manager and open data in the Brazilian House of Representatives in Brazil, you also act in several different networks of peers for collaboration. Certainly collaborating with peers in other legislatures severely diminishes the risk inherent to the digital transformation process in the legislative. I'd like to hear your thoughts about this. What are your considerations about how the correlation between the increased level of collaboration and the diminished level of risk associated with the digital transformation in the legislative?
Thank you, Luis. Well, they are completely correlated. When we started to work with other parliaments in any of the projects that I've been working with, what we can see is that the more you debate, the more information you get, the less mistakes you are going to make, the more you get to know the risk. Because briefly, I would like to say that when we talk about cooperation and collaboration between two private companies, often they take care of different parts of a problem. So I will be focusing one side of the problem and you will be focused on another side of the problem. But when it comes to a parliament, we have almost similar, at least, core processes. So we all work on the same problem, on the same processes. So the good thing about having more parliaments discussing the same things with you is that you have different perspectives, different cultures, because countries are in different states. Some countries are well developed, others are developing, and with different societies, with different demands, and probably due to globalization, the things that a country is facing now, I will probably face in the near future. So I can get to learn from the country that is facing the problem right now, and I will be able to deal better with that because I will have more information. Or if I know that I'm going to face something in next year, for example, and I know that there is another parliament that has faced that same problem a couple of years ago, we can exchange information. So the ones that are better can help the ones that are starting right now. This is the best way for me to get proper information in order to decrease the risks that you can face while implementing, developing, deploying anything new for your parliament.
Thank you so much, Rodolfo, for your considerations. Following up on that, James, I'd like to bring a question to you. As you mentioned, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association represents not only national parliaments, but also devolved and subnational legislatures from all around the world, in Commonwealth countries, of course. But they have different cultural, political, and religious backgrounds in these regions. You have been promoting personally the strengthening of these bonds of cooperation between these legislatures in the topic of modernizing the legislative institutions. I'd like to get your insights on what is the importance of these actions, specifically of the CPA, not only to the national parliaments, but also to the devolved and subnational legislatures that you have been working with.
Yeah, absolutely, Luis. Yeah, the CPA is very, very proud of the fact that we work with both national and subnational legislatures. I think we're somewhat unique in that regards. We certainly treat it as one of our USPs. And perhaps it follows on a bit from what Rodolfo was saying about sort of the differences between Parliament. I think the starkest way that I can demonstrate the difference between some of our members is that our largest Parliament that we work with is where I am joining you from right now, the United Kingdom Parliament, which is 1,425 members. Our smallest is the Falkland Islands Assembly, which is 11 members. So a difference of, so our largest parliament is 130 times the size of our smallest. So quite a radical difference, but I think one of the key things for us is that they're all treated the same. They're all regarded as having equal footing. But I think sort of beyond just the size of the chambers, the size of the parliaments, it is that cultural difference, it is that difference in terms of sophistication, how far along in this journey they are. And I think there's sort of the wider issue of how a number of our smaller parliaments, and I don't want to create too much of a link between subnational and smaller, but there in our membership there is, on the whole, that general correlation. There is this limited staffing and administration with restricted capacity. That we see a lot there. So any potential sharing of best practice that can make the work of Parliament's administration more streamlined, more efficient, more productive is incredibly valuable. And certainly a number of technological and digital innovations that would fit into these categories of best practice, those that can create greater efficiency, are certainly very, very valuable. I know that one of the key things that Bússola Tech likes to promote is this idea that tech doesn't have to be overtly disruptive. This isn't radical transformation that's going to take many years to get used to. This is about making the pre-existing functions of Parliament work better. So I think any sort of so the idea of this peer-to-peer learning and streamlining those principles is very, very valuable. But something else I'll say is, while some of our smaller jurisdictions and some of our smaller legislatures do face some of the most acute resource challenges, I also don't want to create this narrative that those legislatures are also the ones that need to be guided and directed by the larger national parliaments. Often it works in the other direction. One of the amazing success stories within our membership, and Luís, I know you heard about this last week when you joined us for one of our programs, comes from the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. So one of the provinces in South Africa during the COVID pandemic took an extremely innovative approach. They're really one of the leaders in the parliamentary world in terms of going virtual. It was one of the very first legislatures in the world to hold a virtual full sitting of the House with public access in real time. So it's really about that scalability. These innovations can scale up, they can also scale down. So I mentioned how one parliament is 130 times bigger, but actually we do see within our membership that you can scale up and you can scale down. The Falkland Islands Assembly I mentioned, they're a leader in having laypersons within their parliament acting on committees. That's something that can scale up. It can also scale down. And sticking with the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, they've also mainstreamed technology and innovation in their parliamentary strategic plan. So I think that just highlights how a number of innovations are happening at the subnational levels. And again, it is often a case of scaling up in applying innovations in other jurisdictions. It's almost a sort of testing ground or a sandbox, if you'd like. So yeah, very, very valuable having those smaller parliaments really often leading the way in terms of innovation.
Thank you for your considerations, James. We commonly say that the level of the digital maturity of a legislature is represented when a legislature invests the necessary amount of resources for their digital transformation, not less, not more. So you don't need to develop a super sophisticated solution if you don't need it. So I think I get this from your perspective that each of these legislatures you have been working with, they have their unique perspective of the digital transformation, the legislative and their modernization process. And each one of them has something to teach their colleagues, either parliamentarians or technical staff as well. I think this is a very interesting perspective for us to discuss. Alisha, I'd like to come to you with a question. As you mentioned, and as many colleagues present here are familiar with ParlAmericas, you guys have been promoting both the creation and the strengthening of networks throughout the continent with parliamentarians and technical staff from national parliaments. And I'd like to get your perspective on the importance of these channels of collaboration between legislatures in the region to modernize both parliamentarians and technical staff as well.
Thank you, Luís. Look, at ParlAmericas, we really firmly believe that kind of multilateralism, regional integration, globalization, the promotion of human rights and democracy and international relations demands an increasingly active participation of national parliaments. We are being confronted with these major global issues, and the idea of countries coming together and working together is the only way, and all pulling in directions together on these really important issues is so paramount. And for that reason, but we all know, we're in this room, we're saying that this collaboration between our parliaments, both through CPA, IPUs, programming in ParlAmericas, we see the value, the inherent value in this. For me, on the digital transformation side of things, we have been witnessing how this ability to have peer-to-peer learning is essentially allowing parliaments to learn from each other, and for many parliaments to leapfrog forward, right? To adapt practices far more quickly, because they're learning from the knowledge and experiences of their peers. You know, we saw it before the pandemic. The El Congreso Virtual in Chile inspired Mi Senado application in Colombia, right? And that's because parliamentarians from Chile and Colombia met through our Open Parliament Network, discussed it, and figured out how they could collaborate with each other to help that happen. We certainly then saw it again during the pandemic, even more so. And I've done it before on one of your programs, but shout out to Brazil. The Parliament of Brazil very quickly adapted to the pandemic for virtual sittings, but very quickly, proactively translated all of the material into multiple languages and reached out to parliaments across the hemisphere and the world to say, we've kind of done this. We know this hit us fast, this pandemic. How are we going to adapt? And we've got some practices that we want to share with you. And as James was just saying, and even at a scale issue, it wasn't an issue. I mean, Brazil was speaking with Trinidad and Tobago, right? And saying, how can we help you? What can we do to help you along in this? So we can all agree, like, this is incredibly important and useful way, as James has said, and as well as Rodolfo, for these parliaments to learn from each other, to build on each other's successes, to move forward in this agenda. For us, we very quickly recognized that it's not just at the parliamentarian level. That's naturally where we were first working, right? It was with parliamentarians, and it was really around the building of political will, right? Kind of change is hard in traditional institutions, right? Like, they're built to be kind of fairly traditional and to stick with rules, and adaptation and change can be a little bit challenging. So we were really working in the political will space, working with parliamentarians on how to get them to feel comfortable with change. But the people who have to actually implement the change, especially in this technology modernization of parliamentary practice space, is the staff. And so this is why we then, through really the leadership of the parliamentarians, saying, like, ParlAmericas should create a staff network as well to really help technical staff from parliaments have a space to exchange with each other and likewise learn from each other. And we have proof. We can see through the indicators from when we track, how is our programming with parliaments actually achieving results, that we understand that with the technical staff also working with each other, sharing with each other, we're seeing a much more a rapid adaptation of these things. And I will then close here just to shout out, it's also collaboration amongst our organizations, right? So it's collaboration amongst the parliaments, but our organizations. I mean, in the Caribbean, we work very closely with James and CPA in the parliamentary clerk kind of collaboration space, right? Because we understand that we as organizations have all recognized the value of say this work in digital transformation, and how can we as organizations pull together, learn from each other, and make sure that we're coordinated in the work with parliaments to give them the most access to information and tools that we can. And so I think that's also a really important part of this sort of collaboration that we're all promoting here.
Thank you so much, Alisha, for sharing your remarks on this issue. Rodolfo, I'd like to come back to you with some topics that both Alisha and James shared here on their remarks. That is, one of the main challenges of different networks for the digital transformation in the legislative is to expand and to welcome representatives from legislatures that are either initiating their journey into the digital transformation realm or haven't yet started it. I'd like to get your perspective on that and how can we engage with these legislatures for them to understand, okay, you don't need to develop an artificial intelligence strategy for digitalizing your legislative process, but your perspective is also interesting for you to bring to colleagues here. So how can we engage these legislatures to participate in these networks as well?
Okay, Luís. So first, I would like to thank Alisha for her words on Brazil. And regarding your question, I can say that we had a very enriching experience with the Open Data Hub project. And regarding exactly what you mentioned, because when we started this project, we were about 7 parliaments, 7 legislatures. They were all mature in open data. But nowadays we are 29 parliaments, so there is a huge number there is a huge difference among those 29 parliaments. What we did to keep up and bring in the ones that were not as mature as the first 7 was to divide the 29s in 3 groups. The first group is the mature ones. The second group is the ones that have already started to use or to deploy or to deliver open data, but they are not as mature as they need to be. And the third group is the ones that haven't started yet, but want to start. So what we did is the mature ones elaborated a sort of a maturity model for open data, and we hand that to the second and third group. So they had a vision of what they have to do and what are their goals, or what at least their goals should be. And from the first group, the mature ones, 2 parliaments are all the parliaments are going to help, but 2 of them are going to walk hand in hand with the second group in order to help them achieve the maturity that they want to. And so on, the second group will do the same with the third group. But we have meetings all the time, at least once a month, and sometimes presential, but since pandemic, remote, virtual meetings did become a reality. So we are constantly talking to each other in order to keep them into the group. And what I believe is this is, if you have a common goal, if you are willing to share your knowledge, if you're willing to give what you have achieved, and if you're willing to receive what others have achieved, I believe that you can keep the group together for a long time, in the long run. For example, this project started in 2017, way before, not way before pandemic, but at least 2.5 years before pandemic. And things were way more difficult because often we only had presential meetings, so it was costly and so on. It was a burden to get hotels and plane tickets and so on. Right now, things are way better, way easier, and way cheaper. So there's no excuse to not bring anyone into the group if that one is willing to become part of the group and to work to achieve the goals of that project.
Thank you for your considerations, Rodolfo. James and Alisha, I'm going to bring you a similar question now, starting with James. We know the digital transformation has a technical dimension, as all of us mentioned here at some point, but it follows the political leadership of members of parliament and their vision of their institution in the future, as a little bit what the Honorable Marcelo Ramos and the Honorable Ernest Larraín mentioned in their remarks in the opening debate. However, we know that this topic is not always the priority topic in the agenda for parliamentarians, and more pressing concerns take precedence in this agenda. So, James, starting with you, what are your thoughts on how to engage parliamentarians in this discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Luís. Yeah, I think in the first instance, as we all know, the past 2 years have highlighted how important it is to give consideration to the technical dimension of how legislatures can and arguably should modernize and innovate. I know that I think all three of us now have highlighted some best practices in terms of parliaments that were very, very quick, very, very agile, very, very flexible in responding to the pandemic. But I think for every one success story, we can point to lots of other legislatures that were shocked out of their skins when they had to change. A number of our branches, including in the Americas, highlighted to us how they had to undertake a decade's worth of modernization in the space of a few weeks, and that certainly wasn't easy for them to do. And the magnitude of some of the changes were very, very great. And I think, and this has already been mentioned, I think for a number of industries, they would have looked at Parliament and said, well, actually, you're not having to innovate in the truest sense of the word. Some of these things we've had for a long time, video conferencing, for example, but as Alisha quite rightly said, legislatures have been historically very traditional institutions. So there's a real shock to the system. So I think this idea of crisis planning is key, and members need to be involved in that. I think also in terms of engaging them, if there's one thing that members do like, and it's maybe a manipulation of the term technical, they love standing orders. We always talk about standing orders being a parliamentarian's best friend, and these rules saw heavy duty changes, whether they were permanent or not. Some of them were sort of emergency changes that may or may not have since been rescinded. But members all of a sudden had standing orders and rules of procedure that had radically changed. And I think it's vital to highlight to members how this can impact on how they're able to undertake their roles and responsibilities in Parliament. There's very, very good evidence that came out of the Scottish Parliament that showed that a number of members got very, very frustrated with the new modalities of undertaking committee inquiries. There was very, very mixed reception to that. So I think there can be a variety of reasons for why members felt uncomfortable with that, whether that's their traditionalists, whether the initial deployment of that modality was suboptimal. You could dig deeper into that. But I think if members are more engaged and more involved in modernisation and the technical side of things from an earlier point in time and in a bit more of a proactive way, I think they'll have fewer frustrations. And I think something else that's important to highlight and maybe sometimes gets lost in terms of modernisation and the technological side of Parliament, and this speaks to the representative role of Parliament and parliamentarians, and that's about digital poverty or technological poverty. Many of us look to innovations such as live streaming, e-petitions, social media, and say that democracy has been strengthened and made more accessible. But there is this digital divide that is very, very keenly felt by certain sections of the population. In the UK, which might like to pride itself on being a somewhat modern society, pretty well developed, 8% of our adults have zero basic digital skills. They can't even use a search engine to find information, and a further 12% of our adults, so we're now totaling 20%, we're estimated to have limited abilities online, so missing one of the basic 5 digital skills, whether that's finding information or undertaking transactions, whatever that might be. There was none, so that's 20% that simply don't have digital skills. And if your representatives are similarly digitally illiterate, there's a real democratic deficit there. People want their parliaments to be accessible in every sense. So I just think it's also worth highlighting that there is that other side to democracy, and saying to members, you need to be pretty well aware of some of these changes that are happening, because it can benefit your constituents quite directly. They will come to you. So that's another way that I would suggest we get members' attention on this and get them to prioritise. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts on that.
Thank you so much, James. Before I yield the floor to Alisha, just mentioning that we are going to discuss this topic tomorrow on how to bridge the technical dimension of the digital transformation, the legislative with members. Actually, we have a very active member of ParlAmericas, Luís Rojas from Chile, the colleagues here from the Senate in Brazil, the US House of Representatives, and our colleagues at Novel Works as well. Alisha, I'd like to get to you. You mentioned on your previous answers that ParlAmericas is engaging with its parliamentary network in the region. How to engage this network specifically with this topic we have been discussing here today?
Perfect. Thank you, Luis. Well, first, actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to build a little bit off of what James was speaking to too, because I think it's a really important piece. And I think it's really important to highlight that governments, parliaments, I think we as a society coming through this pandemic have recognized the need. And so I do think it's pertinent to say, if this is about the Americas, or that this session was really also looking at the Americas, that the Summit of the Americas, which is about to take place in a couple of weeks, did highlight building a regional cooperation around the issue of digital transformation as one of the key priorities. For this very reason, is to really make sure that that digital access is affordable, universal, that digital literacy and cybersecurity are things that we're thinking about, so that all of society can benefit from these tools that literally have allowed me to have my career through a pandemic, but that's not everybody had the same privilege that I've had, or that our parliaments have, that our organizations have had. So I think it's a really, really important piece. And I think it's really important piece to say that I think this will be one of the real motivators to get parliamentarians to really engage more critically with this very important issue of digital transformation. Yes, and then through, again, though, I truly believe it is through this interparliamentary diplomacy work, or the sharing with peers, that have brought members along thus far, and will continue to help strengthen their ability to kind of confront with this this issue of, learning from each other on how to, and that we as institutions of organizations who serve our member parliaments can also figure out how are we going to better serve them on, look, James, I agree, there's a lot of parliamentarians who also are digital illiterate. How can we support parliaments and having training programs for their parliamentarians to ensure that we can help bridge that divide with the members themselves? How are we working with parliaments to ensure that they understand how critical this piece is around constituency work, because that is a really important part of Parliament's work, not just what's happening in the House, but what's happening with their constituents. And I think there is a critical space for our organizations to be supporting parliaments in this regard. And I think we have been definitely through our network, right? So through the Open Parliament Network, of course, linking it up with what we see as Open Parliament, which are the elements of a strong functional parliament, right? Transparency, accountability, access to information and data, right? And then, but a big piece is the citizen participation. How are we making sure that parliaments are as representative as possible, and how are they engaging with citizens, a broad cross-section of citizens? So I think all of this really has to work together. It's parliaments both working on how they're fixing or modernizing inside parliament, but how they as our leaders within their countries about ensuring that the reach of digital transformation is reaching all of their citizens, so that those citizens can likewise participate actively in society, because digital tools are a major part of that now, and we know this.
Thank you so much, Alisha. Before going to our final question, I'd like to share a very brief comment on what you and James just shared. That is basically, we recommend colleagues from IT staff, from the technical staff, that they might have a perspective of what it is that desirable for the digital transformation strategy in a legislature. But at the end of the day, the user of these solutions are the parliamentarians, are the parliamentary staff. So they are the ones that should be heard. So if the parliamentarians said, okay, they forgot my password, is not big enough, and I cannot use this, and I'm losing the vote at the time of the session because of this, you should hear them. You should make it simple. You should make it intuitive. Because the main job of a parliamentarian is not to think on the digital transformation, is to think on their representation, on their constituents, on the agreements they're building. And the digital solution there is available to help them, to be another tool, not to be an inconvenience for their political process. So we must be mindful of these. I don't like calling limitations, but there's different characteristics of parliamentarians. We might have parliamentarians that are digital ready, and they are demanding for new solutions, but we might have those as well that are more traditionalists and say, okay, maybe let's go a little bit slower, you know? So it's a very interesting perspective on how to deal with the digital transformation in the legislative, and particularly we believe that's the role of the colleagues working in the Secretary General office, in the clerk's office, should be this bridge between the parliamentarians' world and the technical world, to have the sensibility of both, to understand a common path. I'd like to go to our final question so we don't burden your agenda with another delay. This is a common question for all of you. I will start with Rodolfo. And if you indulge me, I will have a minor quote that represents a lot of what we have been living on for the last 2.5 years, maybe, of pandemic. So this quote is, where the legislative body should be considered time without meeting, this would likewise put an end to liberty. For of two things, one would naturally follow, either that there would be no longer any legislative resolutions, and then the state would fall into anarchy, or that these resolutions would be taken by the executive power, which would render it absolute. This quote is from the 18th century. So far precedes the pandemic and far precedes the effort for legislative continuity we have been living on for the last 2 years. And my question for you is, there was an unprecedented level of cooperation, as all of you mentioned in your answers, between legislatures and between colleagues, between peers at the technical level, to maintain the institutions working in this period, either remotely or hybridly. So my final question to you, starting with Rodolfo, is how can we maintain these bonds of institutional friendship and collaboration, if you will, created during this emergency period? And why is so important, in your opinion?
Well, Luis, the way I see things nowadays, that senior managers of any institution, including parliaments, they are always asking us to do more with less resources, lower cost, higher quality, and in less time. So one of the ways that parliaments, legislatures can do that, accomplish that, is by means of cooperation and collaboration. So I don't think that it's going to be easy for the corporations that we have been able to establish during the pandemic. I don't think that it will end easily, because, as I said before, if we have a same goal, if we have the same goal, and we are willing to help and to be helped by others, and considering those restrictions that we have today, even considering that there is a shortage of IT professionals all over the world, cooperation and collaboration is an important asset nowadays, in my opinion. And given the fact that during the pandemic, we all started using technology more often than before, way more often than before, it's going to be way easier to keep in touch with each other, to exchange information, to exchange experience, to help each other like it's easy for any one of us to just hand through the internet a chunk of code from Brazil to Australia, about half of the world. It's 12, 14 hours difference. So that's not a problem anymore. And if they have, or if they hand us anything and we have any kind of question, just a WhatsApp call or a Zoom or Meet or any other tool that we can use, we can even work together in the same code nowadays. And now that we are, well, part of what I'm saying was available before, but because of the pandemic, we got used to that on a daily basis. So I think that that's how we can prevent those collaborations to break down. Of course, I believe that not all collaborations or corporations that were built during the pandemic are going to survive. But I believe that if we share the same goal and we have to produce something, and we are all having these difficulties in order to get more IT professionals, and also given the fact that the discussion among people that work basically on the same core business, it's really hard to break down.
Thank you so much, Rodolfo. James, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely, Luis. And yeah, I really liked where Rodolfo said about this spirit of collaboration and cooperation won't end easily. And I'd certainly echo that. And I'll also refer back to something that Alisha said earlier about, we're kind of talking about the unprecedented cooperation between legislatures. And I actually think it's sort of a perverse but positive side effect of the pandemic, that actually the actors in the parliamentary strengthening sphere also got closer and more collaborative. I know that from our perspective, we've never been engaged in so many activities coordinated with partners in this sphere. And I think that's really, really important, because I think there are all these amazing examples of best practices within individual legislatures, but we're very much repositories at a more macro level. And I think the cumulative value of the experiences that these multinational bodies have, that can be exponential when it's shared and brought together and then shared with other multinationals. And yeah, I'd like to repay Alisha and give our thanks to ParlAmericas for all their collaboration with us recently. It's certainly very valued. I'm not sure if you're in the office right now, Alisha, with colleagues, but if you are, I'm sure some of them I've worked with in the past 12 months. And I think that's really, really great. And I think certainly that, to again paraphrase Rodolfo, is something that won't end easily. I think also, if we're talking about the friendship created during the emergency, in the UK, and maybe it's an idiom that's used in other locations, but we say that you make hay whilst the sun shines. So I think outside of emergency measures, I think it's good to stay conscious that as pessimistic as it might sound, the next emergency could be around the corner, and I think we are stronger together. So keeping that in mind, and I think parliaments should be encouraged to develop the mindset of a high reliability organisation that has risk at the absolute forefront, and this includes, I think, a number of things that parliaments can do and maybe could do better. I think they should seek out failures. I think where there are small failures, they should be investigated to find any underlying systemic deficiencies so that they can be fixed before they get out of proportion. I think they need to avoid finding simple solutions to complex problems. I think operations need to be analysed, and I think feedback needs to be sought from across the ecosystem of Parliament, no matter what your size is. I think there should be a commitment to resilience. I think that's also very, very important. Look at ways to absorb hazards and bounce back, to use a term. And I think this maybe speaks certainly to the role of Bússola Tech, Rodolfo, our various organisations, and that's bring in and defer to expertise. I think, and it's certainly something I'd hope that's come off the back of COVID, is that there's more of a prioritisation of expertise. whether that's technological, whether that's scientific, whatever that might be. Prioritizing expertise in decision making and maybe moving away from an unreasonable deference to entrenched hierarchies. I think that's also something really important, and I think the collective experiences of doing more of that will create really strong legislatures. That, yeah, again, if we do that, whilst we're not that I'm saying we're out of the pandemic, but in more sane times, I think that'll pay dividends for when, and hopefully it's a long time away, when the next emergency hits. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts, please.
Thank you so much, James, for your considerations. Alisha, would you like to share your thoughts about this?
I would, and I can't agree more with James or Rodolfo. So I'm going to take us into just a slightly different direction, because the next emergency we know is coming, and that is the climate emergency. And so, and while that maybe we can be prepared for that, it not to affect how we work in parliaments. It's more this notion of how we have benefited in the last few years of this accelerated ability, use of technologies to ensure connectivity across our world, across our organizations, across our parliaments. How can we use that now and apply it to policy issues that we need multilateral collaboration on, for sure. We all as countries need to be pulling together, and parliamentarians are going to be a key part in building a solution for what we know is going to be a climate crisis if we don't come up with solutions and implement them quickly. So I think that's where I would leave us here, Luís. Yes, this sense of collaboration, this sense of working together through inter-parliamentary fora, through networks to bring parliaments together, but let's keep that collaboration going on policy issues that are confronting our world, and that where we need parliamentarians working together. And I think for sure, it's a genie that's not going back in the bottle. And we've really benefited from it as an organization, for sure. The parliaments have, they do very quickly now, where it used to be they would get together, you know, twice a year in a location with all of the expense and travel. They have an idea that they want to share, they hop on a call, and we help facilitate that. If the issue is interpretation, well, thank you, Zoom, you figured it out for us. We can easily have interpretation on a call now, right? So I think this is could be a real game changer, and hopefully an important game changer to make sure that our parliaments can work together on really important issues to bring, you know, to save our world.
Thank you so much, Alisha, for such insightful comments. And before we end our debate today, I'd like to give each one of you 1 or 2 minutes for any final thoughts. Starting with you, Rodolfo, any final thoughts?
Well, thank you, Luís. Yes, the whole idea is to work together with institutions like the ones that help us get in touch with the other parliaments, and try to embrace the idea of collaboration, cooperation. As Alisha said right now, we are going to probably have an issue soon due to climate change. And the solution for that is not only in the hands of one country, but in the whole planet. So we have to work together and to get more benefits from many parliaments. If we work together, if we collaborate, if we cooperate, we can improve democracy, bringing in more citizens to engage with the legislative process. And that's what we need. It's not that democracy is not good or democracy is getting worse. It's not. What we need is more people participating in the political process, in the legislative process, and technology can help us do that. I believe that technology can help democracy in every country in the world, but mainly in countries that are huge like Brazil, Australia, Canada, United States, and so on. So that's that was my final thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodolfo, for your participation today. James, would you like to share your final thoughts?
Yeah, thanks so much, Luís. Yeah, I think I'll just start again by saying thank you so much to Bússola Tech for putting together this event, specifically yourself and Sarah, and also everyone else who I'm sure is doing a lot behind the scenes. And again, I'll just say this is a new area of focus for the CPA. Again, it is in our strategic plan. And as part of that, we are committing to addressing the digital divide within our membership and also the wider Commonwealth. We are looking to provide additional support and technical assistance wherever appropriate, whether that's peer-to-peer, whether that's from ourselves reaching out directly on a bilateral level. We're also looking to increase the IT awareness, training and resources available for our membership. And also, yeah, I think it was mentioned earlier about parliamentary staff. We're also looking to reach out to them as well to grow their digital capacity and ensure we're all agile and flexible when faced with those next emergencies, those next challenges. And yeah, as part of this commitment, we're very interested in gaining a greater appreciation of innovative approaches beyond just the Commonwealth. I'm very, very aware of all the great work that's being done in Brazil. And yeah, again, a big shout out to Brazil and also Chile, who I know are doing incredible things, and I'm sure there are many, many others that I'm completely ignorant of right now, but I'm more than happy to share my contact details, maybe in the chat function, should anybody wish to get in touch with the CPA. I'd be more than interested to hear from you and your legislature, and yeah, just say thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, James, for your final considerations. Alisha, would you like to share your final thoughts with us?
Thank you, Luís. Again, yes. I mean, I can just echo my colleagues, my co-panelists here. I mean, thank you so much for this opportunity again. Congratulations, Bússola Tech, for an amazing 2 days of sharing of knowledge, and really important to have these spaces. ParlAmericas will continue to work very actively in this space. So we look forward to continuing to partner with you and CPA and Brazil. And don't worry, James, I'll let you know too. I'm happy to share with you all of the innovations happening in this hemisphere. Because there is a lot. The Americas has been a real leader in this space, and it's amazing. It's amazing that they've been so collaborative too about it and are sharing that with each other and across the world. So thank you so much again, Luís. That's all I can say. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Rodolfo, James, Alisha. Before we end, I would like to echo what you just said. Part of the effort for keeping this gene out of the bottle, as Alisha said, is in our hands. In our hands to keep promoting these bonds, keep promoting these meetings, keep insisting sometimes with parliamentarians to say, okay, but try to find a slot on your agenda to meet your colleague parliamentarian because he or she has something interesting for your institution, either to discuss digital transformation of the institution, climate change, as Alisha mentioned, the democratic system, as Rodolfo mentioned. And from our side, from our perspective, Bússola Tech is at everyone's disposal to help in this effort to collaborate, either parliaments, subnational legislatures, devolved legislatures as well as my friends and colleagues here in this panel that represent the best inter-parliamentary organizations can offer for collaboration between legislatures.